On the night of Maundy Thursday, while Jesus was speaking to his disciples in a garden called Gethsemane, located at the foot of Mount Olives, Judas Iscariot arrived with a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Judas had arranged a signal with them and said, "When we get to where Jesus and his disciples are, you will arrest the one I kiss. That will be Jesus." He therefore approached Jesus and, pretending to greet him, said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." And the man Judas came with stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. Those who arrested Jesus then took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. The chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin then started furiously looking for people to give false evidence against Jesus so that they could use it to put him to death, but found none with a good enough reason, though many witnesses came forward. Finally, two came forward and declared, "This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.'" Thinking that that was a good one, the high priest stood up and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under the oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." "You have said so," Jesus replied. "But I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" And the whole Sanhedrin and the chief priest unanimously shouted, "He is worthy of death." Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, "Prophesy to us, Messiah. Who hit you?" Early on Friday morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how they were going to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, and the whole group rose up and took Jesus before Pilate, where they began to accuse him. "We caught this man misleading our people, telling them not to pay taxes to the emperor, and claiming that he himself is the Messiah, a king." I, Nicodemus, was shocked by the blatant lies from my fellow Sanhedrin members, for nobody had ever accused Jesus of such falsehood. And I knew that they were only trying to get Jesus killed legally by the Romans, because they themselves had nothing on him from the Jewish laws. Pilate turned to Jesus and asked him, "So, you are the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "So you say." And having gotten his answer, Pilate turned back to the chief priests and the crowd and said, I find no reason to condemn this man." The people's hostile reaction surprised even Pilate. They insisted even more strongly. "With his teaching, he is starting a riot among the people all around Judea. He began in Galilee, and now he has come here in Jerusalem." Then the chief priest and the elders continued accusing Jesus before the governor. But Jesus gave no answer to any of the accusations. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Now it was the governor's custom during the Passover festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowds. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas. And when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas or this Jesus who is called the Messiah?" He asked this for he knew it was out of self-interest that the Jewish leaders had handed Jesus over to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." And as Pilate listened and thought through his wife's message, the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and have Jesus executed. And I, Nicodemus, was in total disbelief. I could not believe they could stoop this low. When Pilate came to pose the question which of the two they wanted him to release, they all in a deafening voice shouted, "Barabbas! Barabbas! We want Barabbas!" Pilate, confused by the response, then asked, "And what shall I do then with this Jesus who is called the Messiah?" And they all, with a murderous rage, answered, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" To which Pilate asked, totally bewildered, "Why? What crime has he committed?" But they ignored him and shouted all the louder, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, and that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowds and said, "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and our children." And he released Barabbas to them and had Jesus flogged before handing him over to be crucified. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews! Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they spit on him and took the staff from his hand and struck on his head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull, where they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him: "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Two rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. He saved others, but he can't save himself. He is the King of the Jews. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, "I am the Son of God." And in the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. Something, however, strange happened. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. And at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Then Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Father, in your hands I place my spirit. It is finished." He said this and died. When I, Nicodemus, saw Jesus hanging lifeless on that cross, I fell down on my knees and wept. I knew he was hanging there not because he had done anything wrong, not because he had sinned and deserved to die, but he was there because of the sins of those who had placed him there. And I counted myself one of those sinners and knew for a fact that Jesus hung on that cross because of my sin. And right at that moment, I finally understood what Jesus meant when he said to me that night I went to see him, "Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him." And right there, on my knees, tears streaming down my face, I believed that Jesus is the Son of God.